began the same way most stories in those mountains do, with a road that didn't appear on any map. Locals called it Caldwell Hollow Road, but the sign had rusted away years ago. The metal bent and pitted like it wanted to forget its own name. It wound through the Blue Ridges for 23 miles, curving tighter with every turn, until the pines swallowed the sky, and even the winds seemed afraid to pass through. Deputy Raymond Holt hadn't meant to find it. He was following up on a string of missing hiker reports, 5 in 3 years, all filed by out-of-towners, who vanished somewhere between Miller's Gap and Hunter's Bluff. No prints, no tents, no wrecks. Just gone. The sheriff chalked it up to bears, storms, and bad footing. But Raymond had seen the photos the families sent, smiling faces taken beside a wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Caldwell Hollow," a place that shouldn't exist. The deeper he drove, the more the air changed. It wasn't colder or warmer, just heavier. The trees leaned over the road like spectators, their trunks black with moss. The radio hummed with static, but beneath it, he swore he heard another sound, a low hum, rhythmic, almost like someone chanting through water. He turned it off and listened. Silence, then the hum again. Farther off, fading into the woods. He parked by a fallen tree and stepped out. The soil was soft, rich, like it had been turned recently. There were prints in it, bare feet, small, leading toward a slope. He followed with his flashlight, the beam trembling over roots and stones until he reached what looked like the remains of a fence. Beyond it stood a house, or what was left of one. The cabin leaned to one side, its boards gray as bone, windows shattered, porch caved in. But what stopped him was the smell. Not rot, not mold, something stranger, sweet, like burned sap. He called out, his voice breaking the still air. "County Sheriff's Department. Anyone here?" The hum returned, closer now. He swung his light toward the sound, catching movement near the porch, a door half open, rocking on its hinges. He pushed it wider. The floor groaned. Inside, dust floated like ash. There were jars on every shelf, filled with water the color of smoke, each holding something small, stones, feathers, teeth. Above the fireplace hung a painting so faded he could barely make out the shapes. A family standing before the same house, their faces smeared by time. Only the eyes had stayed bright. Too bright. He felt watched. Every step deeper into the cabin made the air denser, as though the walls were breathing with him. In the corner stood a chair, rocking by itself in the draft. Beside it, a journal lay open on the floor, pages swollen with damp. He crouched and read the first line he could make out. "The land won't let us leave. It remembers our names." A sharp crack came from upstairs. Raymond froze. Another step, slow, deliberate, crossing the boards above. He aimed his light at the staircase, but the beam cut out, flickering weakly. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, barely more than a whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." The flashlight flared once more, and for a moment he saw the landing dust swirling, a faint outline of a figure too thin, too tall for the ceiling's height. Then it was gone. He backed out onto the porch, breath shaking, scanning the tree line. The forest had changed. Every trunk bore a symbol, crude spirals carved deep into the bark, oozing sap like blood. They formed a path leading away from the cabin, down toward the hollow. And there, between the trees, lights flickered, lanterns, swinging gently in the dark. He should have left, but the humming had returned, louder now, and curiosity, that quiet curse of every lawman, pulled him forward. The ground sank as he walked, the hum rising until it seemed to come from beneath his boots. At the base of the slope lay a circle of stones, blackened by old fire. In the center, something gleamed, a silver pendant, half buried in mud, etched with the same spiral mark. He picked it up. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was wrong, to complete. No wind, no insects, Nothing. He looked up and realized the lanterns weren't hanging from trees anymore. They were held by hands. Pale faces stared at him from the darkness, eyes wide, mouths closed. Every one of them identical to the figures in the faded painting inside the house. The same family. But they hadn't aged a day. Raymond stumbled backward, tripping over the stones. The figures didn't move closer. They only watched. Then, in perfect unison, they turned their heads toward the forest's edge, the way he had come. Something else was moving there, heavier, slower, as if the earth itself was dragging its feet. He dropped the pendant and ran. Branches tore at his jacket, the road stretching farther away with every step. Behind him, the hum began again, rising, echoing, spreading through the trees until it was all he could hear. When he reached his truck, the headlights sputtered but caught long enough to show the road ahead. In the beam stood a child, barefoot, covered in ash, holding a lantern. Its eyes were white. The light died by morning. The fog hadn't lifted. The mountains sat beneath it like something buried alive, breathing under a shroud. Sheriff Glenn Braden leaned against his cruiser, cigarette trembling between his fingers as he stared at the empty road. Raymond's truck was still there, door open, engine cold, headlights drained to nothing. But Raymond himself was gone. They found his flashlight in the ditch, still warm to the touch, though the batteries were dead. The mud around it was disturbed, not the clean marks of running boots, but something dragged, wide and uneven. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no direction. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. The sheriff called in a small search team, 2 deputies, a rescue dog, and a local guide named Samuel Croft, who knew the ridges better than anyone. They followed the tire tracks up the old road until it ended at the fallen tree. The guide frowned. "That path's older than my daddy," he said. "Wasn't nobody supposed to be out here since the Caldwells left?" "Left?" Braden asked. Croft spat into the dirt. "Back in 41. Said the land took sick. Folks said they went north, but my granddad told me different. Told me they went down instead." The men exchanged glances. Braden didn't ask what he meant. The dog caught a scent near the tree line, whining, tail low. They followed it through the underbrush until the cabin appeared through the fog. Braden slowed. The boards were darker now, slick with dew, the front door ajar. A smell like burnt resin hung in the air. Inside, everything was the same as Raymond had left it. The jars, the chair, the faded painting. Only one thing had changed. The family's faces in the painting had been scrubbed clean. The canvas showed nothing but a white blur where their eyes should have been. "Someone's been here," one deputy muttered. Croft crouched near the hearth, touching the ashes. Fire burned recent. Few hours, maybe. They fanned out to search. Braden found the journal near the chair, its pages stuck together. He peeled one open, careful not to tear it. The writing was shaky, frantic. The hollow calls, when the blood thins. The line must hold. The line must feed. He frowned. Feed, what? No one answered. Outside the dog started barking, short, terrified yelps that broke off suddenly. The men ran out, flashlights cutting through mist. The lead deputy stopped first. Oh God, there was no dog. Only the leash, lying in the mud, clasp snapped clean. The forest was utterly still. Croft pointed toward the slope. There, lantern light. Braden squinted. Down through the fog, faint and flickering, orange shapes moved in a slow circle. Lanterns, at least a dozen. Locals, one deputy whispered. Locals don't live here anymore. Croft's voice was flat. They made their way down, weapons drawn. The closer they got, the quieter everything became. Braden could hear his own heart in his ears. Then, the humming began, low, deep. The same note repeating over and over like a pulse under the ground. They reached the circle of stones. This time, there was no pendant. only a new pattern scratched into the dirt, a spiral that curled inward until it disappeared into a small hole at the center. Croft knelt, tracing the edge. That's not carved. That's grown. He brushed away soil, revealing threads of root shaped like veins. The ground quivered. Back away, Braden ordered. A sound rose from the hole, not air, not wind, a whisper. Dozens of voices, speaking at once. They turned to leave, but Croft wasn't moving. He was staring toward the tree line, eyes wide. Braden followed his gaze and saw them, faint figures between the trunks, still as statues, holding lanterns that glowed with a dull red light. Each one's face was hidden in shadow, but their clothes were old, suspenders, dresses, bonnets from another century. Braden lifted his flashlight and called out, "We're law enforcement. Step forward." The lanterns flickered, and all at once they went dark. The team fired their lights in every direction. Nothing. Croft's voice cracked. "They ain't gone. They just moved." Something brushed past Braden's leg, cold, smooth. He turned the beam downward, a handprint in the mud, fresh. Another appeared beside it, then another. They were circling them. "Fall back," Braden shouted. The deputies stumbled uphill, slipping through vines, grabbing at roots. Braden fired a flare. For a second, the whole hollow glowed red, and in that instant, he saw what was beneath the trees, a clearing filled with shallow mounds, each marked with a spiral carved into wood. Graves, hundreds. The flare hissed out, plunging them into darkness. Then came the humming again, louder, rising into a single, resonant note that shook the earth. The ground beneath the mounds shifted. Run. They didn't stop until they reached the road. By the time they got there, Croft was gone. No scream, no struggle, just gone. The deputies wanted to call for backup, but Braden refused. He didn't know why. Only that saying the name Caldwell Hollow out loud made the trees seem to lean closer, listening. They left that night, but as Braden drove down the mountain, his radio came alive for the first time in hours. Static at first, then a faint voice. Raymond's voice. "Sheriff, they're not dead. They're underneath. Don't dig." The line went silent. Braden didn't sleep. He sat in his office until dawn, staring at the dirt caked on his boots. When the morning shift arrived, they found him at his desk, still wearing his jacket, a map of the county spread before him. A single note pinned to the corner in shaky handwriting. The line never left the hollow. He'd circled 5 more places, other disappearances, stretching back 70 years, all along the same ridge, everyone connected by a faint pattern that, when traced together, formed a spiral. Asterisk 2 days later, Sheriff Braden returned to the mountain alone. The department thought he was on leave, resting, maybe drinking himself into calm. He hadn't told them that he'd been hearing the humming again. Not through the forest this time, through the radio, the pipes in his house, the walls. Always the same rhythm, the same low, steady tone that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. He'd mapped every missing person from the last century, hikers, surveyors, even a census worker from the 1950s, all vanished in a perfect spiral stretching out from the heart of Caldwell Hollow. Each disappearance fell on a line of old family land, all once owned by the Caldwells or their kin, a bloodline that had supposedly died out before World War II, but blood, he was starting to understand, didn't die that easily. He drove at dusk, headlights slicing through fog that never seemed to end. At the base of the ridge, he found what was left of Croft's lantern bent, blackened, and covered in something like tree sap. He pocketed it and continued on foot. The forest felt different now, almost awake. Every creak of branch sounded like breath. By the time he reached the cabin, night had fully fallen. The door hung wider than before, swinging in rhythm with the wind, though he noticed, with a tightening in his stomach, that there was no wind. He stepped inside. The smell hit him instantly. Not death, not decay, but a sweetness so heavy it made his throat tighten. The jars were gone. In their place were dozens of carved wooden figures arranged on the shelves, crude human shapes with spirals carved over their faces. Each figure was marked with a name burned into the base. He found one that made his blood run cold, R. Holt, another beside it, S. Croft, and then, at the very end of the row, one labeled G. Braden. The humming began again, right behind him. He turned, nothing but shadows and dust. Then a floorboard groaned above him. He drew his gun and aimed at the staircase. Who's there? No answer. Just the slow creak of weight shifting on old wood. He started up the steps, one hand gripping the railing. The second-floor hallway was narrow, lined with faded portraits, faces blurred, except for the eyes. They glowed faintly in the light of his flashlight, reflecting back at him. At the end of the hall stood a door that hadn't been there before. It was made of dark wood, the grain rippling like muscle under skin. A spiral symbol was carved into the center. He hesitated, then reached for the handle. The moment his fingers touched it, the humming stopped, cut off mid-note, leaving a silence so deep it made his ears ring. He opened the door. Inside was a staircase descending into the ground. The air was warm, damp, heavy with that same sweet smell. He followed it down. The walls weren't made of stone or dirt, but something that looked like both root and bone fused together. Every few feet, he saw shapes embedded in the walls. Faces half-formed, eyes closed, mouths open as if mid. The deeper he went, the louder a new sound became, whispering, dozens of voices overlapping, impossible to understand at the bottom. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Lanterns lined the perimeter, though none had flames. They glowed faintly on their own, casting a dull red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. And there, in the center, stood the Caldwells, dozens of them, men, women, children, all barefoot, all dressed in tattered clothes that might have once been white. Their skin was pale and waxen, their eyes completely white. They didn't move, didn't breathe. They only stared at him, waiting. Behind them rose a great root system, or what he thought was a root system, until he realized it was something else. It was human, in shape at least, a massive figure fused into the wall. Veins of wood and flesh intertwined, its face hidden by a mask of spirals. It pulsed faintly, like a slow, steady breath. The whispers grew louder, converging into one voice, soft, familiar. Sheriff Braden, you came home? He froze. It was Raymond's voice. From the shadows stepped a figure, gaunt, eyes hollow, skin marked with spiral scars that glowed faintly under the red light. It was Raymond Holt, or what was left of him. He smiled faintly. It doesn't let you go once you've heard it. The song, it's in us now. What did you do? Braden whispered. Raymond tilted his head toward the giant form in the wall. We didn't start it. The land did. It remembers the first hunger. It keeps it alive through us. Braden shook his head. You're not making sense. Raymond stepped closer. You feel it, don't you? The pull, the sound under your feet. It's not death. It's inheritance. The ground shifted, roots twitching like tendons. The Caldwells began to hum, the same note that had haunted Braden for days. The air thickened, pressing against his chest. He raised his gun. Stay back. Raymond didn't move. He only smiled wider. It already knows your name. The humming grew deafening. The lanterns flared, the walls pulsed, and the spiral on the giant figure's mask began to turn, slowly, endlessly inward. Braden fired. The gunshot echoed through the chamber, but the sound was swallowed instantly, absorbed by the walls themselves. The roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around his legs, pulling him down. He struggled, clawing, shouting, but the humming drowned him out. As the roots pulled him toward the floor, he saw the faces in the wall open their eyes. Every one of them was his own. Then everything went dark. Days later, a search team was dispatched to find Sheriff Braden. They never found his body, but they did find his cruiser, parked neatly at the base of the ridge, keys still in the ignition. On the passenger seat lay his notebook, open to the last page. In smeared pencil, written over and over, were 5 words: "The line never breaks." Asterisk, they say the mountains, remember, that the soil holds every name ever whispered to it, and every scream it swallowed. Caldwell Hollow still stands on the map as empty land, government-owned off-limits to the public. But sometimes, when the fog settles low and the wind dies, hikers claim to hear humming coming from the trees, low, steady, almost like breath. Locals say it's the land singing for its own, calling the bloodline home again. Others swear it's nothing but the wind caught between ridges. But if you ever find yourself near the old roads of southern Appalachia and your compass starts spinning, if the forest goes too quiet and you think you hear someone whisper your name, don't answer. Just turn around and leave. Because the Caldwell Line never died. It's still beneath those hills, waiting. If you want to hear more of the secrets buried in America's forgotten places, subscribe, keep your lights low, and never travel these roads alone. Because out here, the stories don't end. They just go quiet.